doing lots of emotional and mental work on the inside. Usually when somebody is apathetic, part of that may be a manifestation of depression, but part of that may be that a person is very, very busy trying to figure out whether they're loved or not, whether they're valuable enough, whether they're doing the right things. There's probably a lot of busyness on the inside, even though you don't see much on the outside.
Ronnie, is there a link between apathy and overeating?
Yes, there's a strong link between apathy and overeating. Oftentimes, the person who is apathetic has so much going on inside. They're so busy setting up an incredibly complex defense against their own pain that they can't do anything on the outside. They're using so much energy. It takes tens of thousands of calories emotionally to do the work they're doing, so there's nothing left, no energy left to do jumping jacks.
What would you say to the person who's feeling apathetic? Sort of, I've been counting my calories, I've been doing all the things right, but I don't feel like I'm losing weight or making progress in my spiritual journey. What's the use? What would you say to someone who may be starting to feel very apathetic about what they're doing? They don't want to write their food down anymore. What would you say to them?
Apathy oftentimes is a disguised fear, and that is the fear that it won't get any better than this, that this is as good as it gets. And I would say to that person that they need to really look at why they're afraid that the future won't get any better. Is this really about the future, or is this about the past? And I would encourage them to talk with other people. Oftentimes we get more hopeless and more apathetic as we withdraw from people, or as we compare our lives too much with other people, especially unrealistic people, people that we think have their lives all together. So it's very important when we start to pull in and feel apathetic and do all this inner mental gymnastics to come back out again and check it with somebody else. Another thing that we can do when we become apathetic is to do a lot of self-sabotage, and it's very important that we kind of come out and start checking what's going on with other people and check our hopelessness.
So this is an emotion that, yes, we do need to feel our feeling, but we don't want to hang with it too long, because it could manifest itself just the way, if we let it go too long or unchecked.
Right. It's okay to feel it. It's important to feel it, but it's also important to understand why we're feeling it and talk with other people so that this feeling doesn't mutate and start to drive our behavior, especially in the area of overeating. We can start to obsess. Oftentimes apathy is a cover-up for obsessing.
Really?
Yes.
In what way?
Apathy on the outside is usually what's happening is it is a cover-up for incredible emotional activity. Should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? Could I do this? If I do this, would that do any good? No, I can't do this. All kinds of mental gymnastics. And oftentimes that obsessing is a form of perfectionism. And oftentimes I will tell people in my practice, you're a perfectionist, when their house is chaotic and they don't do anything, and they'll say, how can I be a perfectionist? I don't do anything. And I'll say, because you won't do it unless it's perfect. And you spend all this time not doing anything and worrying about how imperfect you are.
See, I can really relate to that, because I do. That's one of the ones that I tend to go into. If I can't do it perfectly, I just don't want to even try to do it at all. So I can really relate to that. Why don't we go ahead and talk about perfectionism a little bit, since we kind of naturally went there. How is perfectionism and overeating linked?
Well, they're linked strongly in a number of ways. The first way I want to point out kind of has to do with apathy, too. If I can't do it perfect, I won't do it at all. If I can't lose 10 pounds in a week, then forget it. Hand me another cookie. That's one way, is if we can't do a perfect diet, then we blow it big time. Or a perfect weight loss program, we blow it big time. Another way that perfectionism is linked to weight loss and control issues is through eating disorders such as bulimia and anorexia nervosa, which are the flip side of the same coin, and that same coin is wanting to control one's life through eating. And that disguises feelings of perfectionism. If I'm not perfect, then I'm awful. It's black and white thinking. I'm either X or I'm Y, but there's no in between. And oftentimes people who grew up in families where they had to perform well, they had to do things well, and they were given lots of reinforcement for their performance, but they weren't given a lot of reinforcement and love just for who they were, or if they were rejected strongly when they messed up. What will happen is they will grow up oftentimes doing those same things to themselves. And so if they eat in ways that they don't like or that cause them to add weight, they will do those same things to themselves. They will reject themselves, and they will only reward themselves or be happy with themselves when they eat in the right way. So that gives rise to both eating disorders and overeating and obesity.
I'd like to touch on the anorexia, bulimia just a little bit as well. I had dinner recently with some college kids, and they were sharing with me how, again, I keep using the word epidemic, but we are seeing epidemic proportions of kids nowadays on college campuses who are involved in both of these eating disorders. It's almost a generational thing. I don't think I've ever seen it so strongly before. What is the motivation, or what's the payback for these eating disorders? In other words, what are they receiving in exchange for this behavior? There's got to be something they perceive that they're receiving through this behavior, or they wouldn't be doing it.
Many times people who are involved in binging and purging or restricting, which are the behaviors involved in bulimia and anorexia nervosa, believe that if they just looked a certain way, they would be lovable. And so they go to great lengths to try to tailor the body that they think that they should have to be valued and loved and admired and esteemed.
But when is thin enough? I think that's the frightening part of the disease, is then they actually don't really see how thin they've become.
Any type of eating disorder, whether it is restricting, becoming too thin, or becoming overweight, involves a distortion of body image. So when the teenagers and young adults, which is typically the time that these eating disorders emerge, when they look at themselves in the mirror, part of the disease or disorder is that they do have a distorted image of their body.
Are there any early warning signs for those parents out there now watching, or maybe even if there's some young adults watching this and they think they may be headed down that road? What are some of the early telltale signs that they may be going into either anorexia or bulimia?
Some of the signs are an obsession with food, with recipes, with preparing food, while at the same time losing weight and not eating the food. Wanting to prepare food for other people suddenly. Buying cooking magazines. A rapid weight loss, or running into the bathroom right after one eats. Purchasing laxatives. Some of the other warning signs would be not having a period. Suddenly, a menstruating teenager quits having her period, though there may be other causes for that. If you see absence of menses in combination with other things going on, some of the other warning signs, it's worth taking a trip to the doctor to find out if there's a problem in that area.
Right, because I would imagine catching it early on would be a blessing.
Yes.
In a difficult situation, instead of going into the disease full-blown.
Yes, eating disorders are serious problems, and they need to be addressed as they have serious consequences. One of them is potentially dying. So if you suspect that yourself or a family member or loved one may have bulimia or anorexia, please see a healthcare practitioner.
As soon as possible. We don't want to wait on this one. There again, Franny, I'm struck by fear that strong negative emotion being the underlying issue in all of this. Can you help us with some closing comments once again on fear?
Fear imprisons us. Fear, it's important to face our fears and let them go, but it's also important for us to see why we have those fears and how they have protected us, in a sense. And we need to think about our life being free from those fears and how it would be different. Perhaps it might be scarier, and we might have to take some risks. But it's important to see how fear has kept us safe, but ultimately how it's wounded us and kept us from being free, joyful, and happy people.
Ronnie, thanks so much for sharing with me today. I really hope that the people watching have gained tremendous insight from your wisdom. Thanks.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
We've learned that unresolved emotions can be dangerous, and yet we often internalize anger and other negative emotions in a desperate attempt to be perfect. But unfortunately, perfectionism sets us up for failure in many ways. Falling short of our goals, no matter how unrealistic, chips away at our self-esteem. But what's worse, perfectionists rarely suffer alone. They knock down the ones around them. You see, no one meets the expectations of a perfectionist. Have you ever heard of the should fallacy? It's an obsession with what one should have been, should have done, should have received, and so on. People living with the should fallacy apply it to themselves as well as just about every other person crossing their path. Women succumb to perfectionism and the should fallacy more often than men, and young people fall prey when we don't teach them that perfection is an unattainable goal. Perfectionism often breeds perfectionism. We learn, my body isn't good enough. My schoolwork, my job, my behavior in public, nothing is ever good enough, no matter how hard I try. Parental expectations of perfection, combined with coldness and rejection of a child's performance, can set the scene for eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia. Ironically, those who suffer from these out-of-control behaviors actually develop their eating disorders in a desperate attempt to control. All too often, we react to feeling powerless and mistreated by doing anything we can think of to control our circumstances. Perfectionists do not like to be out of control, but their lives may flip back and forth between perfection and chaos. Is it any wonder that perfectionism is ridden with anxiety? How could anyone possibly expect to do something perfectly all the time? But buried beneath this behavior, a perfectionist conceals the fear of being unlovable, the fear of worthlessness, and the fear of rejection. These are difficult emotions. At this time, Tony will share with us how to dig down inside and uncover our fears without letting them get the best of us.
When we go to the doctor, we don't receive treatment until we know what's wrong. It's the same with fear and other strong emotions. We can't proceed until we know what we fear. We can determine the cause of our fear by monitoring our feelings. Sometimes we're too afraid to uncover our deepest fears. But if you feel the urgent or increasing need to avoid something, you will most likely find your fear hidden there. Talking with another person can keep us from sidestepping the uncomfortable areas. Once you know what you're afraid of, you need to ask yourself why. Do you have a relationship with someone who cannot tolerate your feelings? Or is that person a part of your past? Why do you hide your feelings? Are you afraid of rejection or abandonment? These questions can be sorted out with a friend, a pastor, or a professional counselor. As difficult as this may sound, facing your fear will help you see that fear has not protected you as much as it has imprisoned you. In fact, fear is the opposite of freedom. Ask yourself how fear has limited or imprisoned you. Then imagine what life will be like without fear, both the benefits and the risks. By this time, chances are you'll be ready to break free. When you can identify your actual feelings, you can avoid mistaking other emotions for hunger. Now that you are learning to identify your emotions and your feelings, you need to decide what to do about them. One way of getting back into emotional balance involves accepting and feeling the emotion. Express it by talking, writing, praying, or getting physical, literally. Go out and exercise, dance, garden, do anything that moves you. If you are restless, take a walk. If you're tired, sleep. If you are lonely, call a friend. If this is hard for you, you need to learn to ask others for help. Don't expect people to read your mind and know what you need. This may require learning how to be a bit more assertive than you have been in the past. Don't wait for someone to notice you are hurting. If we're not used to honoring our feelings, we don't tune into our body's needs. We neglect minor ailments or tensions until they become health problems that keep us from exercising or eating right and detract from our overall sense of well-being. That, in turn, triggers more overeating and inactivity. When it comes to strong emotions, remember this: you will either express them or suppress them.
Your workbook reading this week will take you through an adventure of exploration. The time has come to honestly evaluate how well you're accepting the true you, the person who is emerging not only physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. As you progress through this week's material, you will read and learn much about the similarities between butterflies and the true you. You will be asked to truly welcome the true you and to realize that inner changes will bring about transformation. You will be challenged to resist the temptation to weigh on a scale. You will compare caterpillar food to butterfly food. You'll take the time to go through and analyze the clothes in your closet. You'll be encouraged to enhance your appearance and to accept the process of becoming the true you. As I just mentioned, one of your lessons this week takes you into your closet. This assignment includes specific suggestions on how to evaluate your clothes. What do you do with the clothes that no longer fit or simply do not fit with your changing lifestyle? Many PRISM groups routinely collect clothing at the end of this particular lesson. Some of the groups keep clothing on hand for other PRISM class members who may use them temporarily while traveling on their journey to their right weight. Other groups donate clothing to churches, homeless and battered women's shelters, the Salvation Army, rescue missions, Goodwill, and other charitable organizations. Think of the possibilities. This part of the program is completely optional, but what a joy to let someone else reap the benefits of your kindness and commitment to the true you. Have fun and enjoy the adventure.
What a challenging and exciting week. I truly believe that facing and expressing our emotions, whether negative or positive, holds the key to our lasting weight loss efforts. I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to understand this truth and take it to heart. I know because fear has been a stronghold for me in the past. I used to allow it to literally control me and many aspects of my life. Only through my own desire to grow in faith and become a more healthy, whole, and complete person did I find the courage to face my emotions. Whether you battle fear, anxiety, worry, perfectionism, anger, or apathy, please know that you can be healed. You can gain freedom from the strong emotions that cripple your life. If you need help, don't let pride stand in your way. Reach out with courage and be bold. Your clergy, accountability partner, close friend, or a professional counselor